Hi guys, welcome back to Scott Family Homestead. Today we are in the garden. We're about to head into the high tunnel. This is going to be a two-part video today. First we're going to talk about our tomatoes and talk about blight because we have a major case of blight, what we're doing about it this year and how we're moving forward. And then the second part of this video I'm going to hand it over to Ryan. He actually filmed this while I was gone the last couple of days, but he put in irrigation into the high tunnel, and so I'll let him explain everything about that system and how that works. He'll show you how he set that up. It's actually a fairly simple process and it is going to save us a ton of time. Surprisingly, they kind of go hand in hand because the irrigation is going to be very useful for preventing blight next year. You can see a lot of yellow and brown on these tomato plants. I'll show you close up in just a minute, but you can even tell from afar we've got a bad case of blight in this high tunnel. Okay, so this plant here has blight, as do most of them. What you start to see is this yellowing, brown spottiness of the plants. And if you catch it early, it's called early blight. You can cut a lot of this off. What we have here is late blight. It has taken the entire plants. If I cut off all of the damaged spots, I wouldn't have anything left to produce. So a lot of our plants are too far gone to save, and we're going to have to watch the fruit. If it spreads to the fruit, definitely going to stop your production. And if it doesn't spread to the fruit, we can let them ripen in here. So we're going to keep a really close eye on this, and we're going to cut off some of the worst of it and treat with a copper fungicide. So blight is caused by a bacteria in the soil, and the way that you can prevent that is preventing splashback from the soil up to your plants. That's why we trim a lot of our plants. I talked about this in another video. We do a very heavy pruning on the bottom. Well, in this high tunnel this year, we have had to water with a hose, and so when you have it on the shower setting or anything like that, you are getting some splashback. And it just ran wild in here. It got out of control, and I never treated anything at all. And that led to a very large problem of blight in here. So these plants have the spottiness, other ones have just these black dead branches. And so we want to try to cut out a little bit of that and try to get these a little bit healthier if we can. Now we've gotten a huge amount of production out of here, so I'm not disappointed with this, but I do need to address this issue because once you have blight, it will come back year after year. Now, ideally, you just wouldn't plant tomatoes here next year. You would plant something else, and you'd plant your tomatoes on a rotation, and that can help take care of the blight. But we set up this high tunnel specifically to plant tomatoes in here, so we need to get this under control as a long-term plan in order for this to grow well. I could spray all of this down with a copper fungicide, and I probably will, but I don't want to do it in the morning. I'd like to do that in the evening, so it has some time to settle and doesn't burn any of the plants with the sun. What I'm going to do today is harvest all the fruit that I can that is ripe, and then I'm going to cut off any majorly dead or diseased branches and spray just that area with the copper fungicide. I have it in a spray bottle. It is blue, and this is considered organic for organic gardening. Even though I do organic gardening, I try very hard not to spray anything on my plants. Even stuff that is considered organic, I avoid at all costs, which got me into this situation in the first place. I have put off treating any of my plants, so this is a last-ditch effort.
A pepper.
Oh yeah, that's kind of a funny one. That is the second Amish paste I've gotten. A little fold in it. That's super cool.
What happened to it? I had like blossom and dry or something. Mom, look at this atomic grid.
These are my black cherries. They are looking good, but the plants have this. The plants are definitely not doing well. But they're still full of tomatoes, so we will get some food. some of these plants are doing really well and still flowering. So this is one of my other Romas, and it's doing great. I have a couple of cherry tomatoes over here that have the blight on the bottom, but the tops are doing great and they still have flowers. So these are the ones I'm targeting as most important to save. And as I go over, if there's any that are really bad, I might even pull the whole plants to try to save the ones that are still doing okay. Here's another couple of plants that are doing really great on top. They've got really good production, and you really only start to see the blight way at the bottom. So again, these are ones that I want to focus on getting treated. Another important part, if you are removing diseased plant material, you need to remove it entirely from your soil. Ideally, you would burn it, but for sure get it off-site where you want to plant tomatoes in the future. Super important part of this is wash your tools between plants. You can easily spread blight from one plant to another. Probably a huge part of why all these have it is I came through and trimmed the bottoms off all these, and I didn't take it seriously of actually washing this between every plant. And so we're gonna keep this clean. Some people use bleach, but it can wear down your tools. You can also use like rubbing alcohol. I did read that vinegar isn't quite strong enough, so you want to use something a little bit stronger than that. But I'm going to be putting the fungicide right on here too, so that's going to be helpful. Okay, this one I've cleaned up. You can see there's not much yellow left. We've got some flowers on here. This plant looks great all the way down to the bottom. The one next to it I haven't done yet, so you can see how much yellow there is in here. Same type of plant, same variety. What we're doing is cutting out all of this yellow stuff because this can't photosynthesize. This is not helping the plant. So we're going to get rid of all of this diseased stuff and give a light spray with the copper fungicide anywhere we're cutting branches off. If we can get it cleaned up, looking as good as this one, and treated, we still have a potential of growing some more fruit in here. In general, our tomato season is pretty short here in Wisconsin. Even if I save these buds, the chances of getting any more large fruit is probably pretty low. But with these cherry tomatoes, could definitely get some more production. They grow pretty quickly. So those I'm going to prioritize first. Plus they are the ones closest to the door, and I'm just going to work through row by row. As I'm doing this, it's really creating good airflow in these plants as well, which as we approach fall is going to be really important. And it's going to help ripen some of this fruit that's in here because the sun can reach it a little bit better. So pruning like this has a lot of benefits when you are getting rid of things that just can no longer be productive. And then we are making a pile here. This will get removed and burned. We're just working our way through. Found a couple more ripe ones in here, so we'll put these in the box. These little bumblebee tomatoes are pretty cool. This is one of those things where putting systems in place like irrigation can be extremely helpful, but when you're starting a farm or when you're starting a homestead, you don't always have those systems, and you've got a project list a mile long and it just doesn't get done, and you have to just struggle through some of these things before you get to a point where you've got a preventative and a system and something that helps. And so we are still in those early stages of this farm where we don't have those systems in place, and so unfortunately sometimes those first few years are a lot more work until you get something going. So don't be discouraged if you are in a similar situation or if your garden was not great this year. It happens to all of us. Even the best gardeners have bad gardening years, especially if you're just starting out. Don't be discouraged. Start squirreling away a little bit of extra money to get that irrigation system. It's very, very worth it if you are big into gardening. It's kind of hard to see. This was that very first plant that we looked at that was really thick because I don't usually prune my Romas. So we got that. And I did this whole first row, which is definitely very heavily pruned compared to my other rows. But it doesn't have as much dead or dying branches on it. And these ones on the end are very sparse towards the bottom. It's all stuff we clipped off. But it's looking really good as we get to the top. And then I did spray these down where I did cuts. And I'm going to be super careful to pick up all these little branches, get them out of here, and hopefully we saved this row. Now this did take an hour for this one row. I think there's 14 plants in here, with no guarantee that it's really going to do anything. So it kind of begs the question, is it worth it? So those of you that have fought blight before, what do you think? One of the things you can do to prevent this is put in irrigation. With irrigation, you don't get the splashback with the drip irrigation. If you have a sprinkler irrigation, you could still deal with more blight. But with this style irrigation, which Ryan put in while I was gone the last couple days, you can prevent that splash that's getting these bottom branches. Now, the other really cool thing about drip irrigation is that you can put fertilizer or treatment through it. So we could put the copper fungicide through this hose to prevent early blight. At this point, we have late blight and we need a little bit more than just targeting at the soil level. But early in the year, next year, we can put some of this copper fungicide through and knock back the bacteria that is naturally in the soil and prevent it from coming up into our plants. So that's the long-term plan and a huge part of why we wanted irrigation. Drip irrigation is a huge blessing. Like I said, my husband put it in while I was gone. He surprised me with it. I didn't know that he was working on this the last couple of days, and I'm really thrilled to have it. We watered in here last night. You can see the soil is still wet. None of my plants are wet or damaged. So this is a huge blessing. I'm going to go ahead and work on this blight a little bit, but what I would really love, if you have any resources or anybody who has dealt with this, maybe a video you've watched that addresses this, the blight situation, specifically late blight, can you link that for me or comment below who to look to for help on this? Because this is something that is new to me. At our old homestead, we rotated where our tomatoes were every year, and I never dealt with blight. I never had it. A huge game changer for our garden this year is having this much of it. So if you have any really good resources, please send them to me. And now I'm going to switch over to my husband and this irrigation system and all the details on that.
Welcome back to Scott Family Homestead. Today we are going to put in an irrigation system in this high tunnel. We only have a little bit of time left. Christine's out of town and I would love to get this completed before she gets back. So come along with me. Let's get this installed and we'll see how everything goes. So August is a little bit late to be putting in an irrigation system, but you know, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. This box right here, I had such a hard time finding that. We moved it from our previous house and I knew that I had put it in the garage somewhere. I could not find it, but today I was able to find it, so it's great. It is an irrigation system that I had purchased from Irrigation King, and this was one that was meant for the high tunnel at our previous house. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to look for the pieces that I need, figure out if I've got everything to complete this system, and then we'll get to installing. So I'm going to come in the back end of this high tunnel so we can water the edges, but then I'm also going to have a line of poly tube going right along all the rows of tomatoes so we can get some drip line set up for those. This placement here is also going to help us if we wanted to water the pumpkins with irrigation or even just with a hose. We'll have that set up right next to that garden. So this is the box. As I found it, we've got a whole bunch of drip tape connectors. So those get a hole punched in the main drip line and then they go onto the drip tape. So this right here is poly hose. This I just bought and had this shipped here because we ran out. That is drip tape and that is what has the emitters in it. I don't know if you can see them, can't really see them on this tape, but the emitters come out between those two blue lines. So those hook onto one side of these connectors. It has a little valve on there too that you can turn it on and off. The drip tape connects to this side and then these get pushed into the poly hose. Now one thing that I'm noticing, this entire set, these are connectors for the poly tube, and they're all, let's see, where is it printed on here? Right there, if you can see, it says 800. That is a series 800 connector that is for 3/4 inch poly tube. In our previous high tunnel, I had 3/4 inch poly tube. In this one I do not, but I do have these, which are series 600, and the series 600 are for 5/8 inch poly tube, which is what we have here. That's what I ordered. So I have the right connectors. These guys I'm just gonna keep in the box for another day. This is a filter system. Your poly tube will come in from the garden hose, and then you will hook this to a garden hose end. This will go onto the filter line, and what this is a 15 psi pressure reducer. So everything after this point, you'll have your supply coming in here, everything after this point will be 15 psi or less, which is what you want for your drip tape. You want it to run at 10 to 15 psi. This is a filter, so the water comes in, it gets filtered out here, prevents anything from clogging up those emitters. And then here we just have a ball valve that we can turn the whole system off or on depending on how we turn that. And then this garden hose connector will hook onto the poly line moving forward. So that's your filter system. You'll have more run till you get to your garden, where you'll start to branch off and put in some of the drip tape. Alright, so we're inside the high tunnel. We've got the hose coming in, going all the way up, and then right here there's a shut off. So this is a connector that goes from the poly tube to a garden hose fitting. This is the pressure reducer, and then this is a screen filter. So pressure reducer to screen filter to large shutoff valve here. I turn it on, water comes out, which is good. And then this is another adapter that's going to go to more poly tube here. So I'll run this poly tube and then run my lines to where I want to go in order to run the drip tape. So we got the main, water is in the high tunnel. A little bit of dripping here. I'll put some plumber's tape on here to try to help with these threads. These are just bare threads on here right now, just as I'm kind of fitting stuff up and make sure everything works. So I'll get some plumber's tape on there, make sure those get sealed up and don't drip. And then, yeah, we'll get running some of the main lines in here and hook them all up. Okay, so every place where there's a T-post and this Florida weave, we want to put a T connector here that has a valve, and then a connector for drip tape. So we'll punch a hole in here, set this up here, get the drip tape attached. We'll run the drip tape all the way to the end of the row, and then we're going to put a cap on the end. You don't have to use these caps. They do come in handy, but you don't have to use these. You can just kind of bend the double over the line and just snap that back. So one thing you want to be careful of when you're running this is you don't want your poly hose to get stepped on a bunch. So down here, instead of putting it on the outside of these T-posts, I've got it tucked just inside the T-posts. Every aisle is going to have this run along in front of it, but there's not really much you can do to keep it from being stepped on all the time, but that at least should keep it from getting stepped on quite so much. So we've got a little walkway, got the line run all the way to the end. So every row of tomatoes, every row of peppers, the cucumbers, and the zinnias will be run off of this irrigation. There's a couple of beds here in the front, one over there as well, and then one that runs along the side of each of these. And I think I'm just going to run the tomatoes and the peppers off of it today, and then I'll work with Christine to figure out what we want to do with those edges. There's a couple different options. You can do a low pressure sprinkler system or you can run drip irrigation lines along there as well. So I'll talk to Christine, figure out what she wants to do there. But at least the main part, the bulk of the time spent watering this garden is right here with the tomatoes and the peppers. So getting the bulk of that set up so that all we have to do is water that edge and water this edge, and then the couple garden beds in front here. That's going to save so much time every single day coming out here to water. So yeah, hopefully she likes the surprise. Let's get the drip tape installed. Okay, so this is a punch for the polytube. It allows you to push in. It's got a sharp edge on it. You can push in and poke a hole in there, and then this barbed fitting just presses in there. All right, so here we've got the polytube and this punch. So you just line up about where you want this to go. Twist. And pro tip here would be make sure there's no water in the lines when you do that. We've got this hole punched in here with this tool. We can simply grab our connector, string out of the way, and kind of twist it, and there you go. Pops in there just like that. No connectors needed. The pressure in this will push this out against the wall of this polytube and keep it from leaking. And then we will have the drip tape connect here and go all along these tomatoes. All right, so we got this valve installed here. We got the drip tape installed on the end of that. And then this runs all the way down along the base of the tomatoes. And then on the end of it, we've placed this cap. Like I said, you could just like double this over and crimp that, and then that would stop the flow as well. I got a good deal on these end caps, so I'm trying them out this time around. All the emitters are on the top side of this hose. See if I can find one. They're in this blue area right there. If you can see that little crease in the tape, that is what lets the water drip out. So that one is done. I will turn that on so that you can see what happens here. I'll turn that on. It fills up with water, and then you can see these little emitters start to drip. You can see that dripping into the soil there. And one thing to note is that when these turn on and off over the course of several days, that hose might walk itself out from underneath the plants. So just make sure that you've got it positioned in a way that won't walk away on you. So when it inflates and deflates, it lays flat. Sometimes before you know it, it'll be in the middle of a row. Staples help. Otherwise, if you're just in here, just check it and tuck it under there. So we've got this right next to the base of that plant, right next to the base of that plant. I need to get in here and do some weeding, but that should be dripping right there onto that plant perfectly. One thing that's really nice about drip irrigation is that you are able to water midday if you want to. You don't have to worry about water splashing on the leaves and getting sunburned or sun scald to the plants. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll finish the rest of these rows I think there's like 10 rows to be completed. So I'll get those all wrapped up and ready to go. And then the bulk of this high tunnel will have irrigation. We'll be all set to go. Hopefully Christine enjoys this little surprise when she gets home and can take a break from watering quite so much every single day. Thanks guys, appreciate you hanging out with me today. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to the channel, and you can watch Christine and I bring life to this retired dairy farm, one step at a time, one project at a time. We appreciate you all. We'll see you soon. Thanks guys.